privacy conscious advertising. And browsing and your cell phone controlling this information, everybody across the world, especially in the EU, is hyper focused on what information are people brokering between each other that the individual did not consent to. That's the movement on privacy, the privacy wave, I would call it, is not stopping.
Welcome to the Pubway podcast. Each episode will showcase a conversation with a leader from the publishing world. If you're working at a publisher, a DSP or SSP, or you're just curious about the media industry and want to sit down and pick the brains of the experts from within the publishing space, then this is the show for you. Hello, and welcome to the Pubway podcast. My name is Iannacchino.
And I'm Mike Villalobos. And in today's episode, we are excited to talk about, shocker, privacy. But I think there's been a lot of change within privacy, especially within the last 2 weeks. And going into the do's and don'ts of CTV, what log level data means to a targeting strategy, and also how to stand out in a sea of, I would say, a very saturated market when it comes to DSPs. But I think we have a lot to cover today, so I'm excited to dive into it.
Absolutely. And to help us cover all these topics, it's my pleasure to introduce the CEO and co-founder of Pontiac Intelligence, Keith Gooberman. Hi, Keith. How are you?
I'm good, Tina and Mike. Thanks for having me.
Of course. And I would love to, before we kind of dive into our conversation, to give a little context to our listeners, a bit more about not only Pontiac, but your own career and kind of how you ended up being a founder of this company.
Yeah, I mean, advertising, especially in like the advertising technology space, I think most people that find themselves in this, like myself, end up here quite randomly. This is not that well studied in universities. There's many people in the business that don't understand it all. So there's not that many people teaching it from the ground up to young ones, although more today than when I was a kid. But like many of us, I found myself in this business through some random events. And I studied engineering at university. Thought I would design cars, I guess, maybe. I didn't really have much of a plan. But I ended up getting a job in publishing in New York and working on the digital rollout of some of the Condé Nast properties and learn the business, a little bit of ads and CPMs and display ads and different terms they use for the word banner ad, which they still use all these terms. And I went from there to an ad network. So I started to see that there was a way to make money from kind of the publishers that weren't as well known and aggregating them and building products around different ad units. And then I ended up getting a job at a trading desk for one of the holding company agencies and learning programmatic rolling out from the ground up. And it was then that I jumped off and said, I'm going to run my own trading desk style company. And I launched that in 2014. And then from that, we built a engineering practice there and brought in a computer science leader in Eric Thorson, and then brought in a team and we started building technology. So Pontiac Intelligence was born in 2018. And it's a DSP for buying ads on different publishers, mostly CTV. But we ended up basically building a DSP through a lot of kind of research and development. And we wanted to build closer relationships with the publishers themselves. And the best way to do that is to build technology to access it via either an ad server or the SSP relationship they have. And that's Pontiac. And here we are today. Couple of years into it, battling the DSP market, as you said, pretty saturated. But we're battling, doing our thing.
I mean, you've been in it for a while now, so I'm sure you're doing just fine. And actually, one small bit of tidbit that I got 2 weeks ago from a college student, they're like, what are all these acronyms? So I was
you
like,
have no idea what you're in for.
Yeah, I was like, it's alphabet soup. I get that. So DSP is a demand side platform for the college listeners that have basically reading me for being too in my own style.
I do this too, so I apologize.
Yeah, no, some of the best advice I've ever heard is treat everyone like they're 5 years old. And it's okay to to set the playing field and to
I mean, in this business, there's some defense, I think, played by the people who understand it to keep throwing out random terms. Just understanding the jargon is part of maybe some of the defense part of the business and people's jobs a little bit, but it is, we make it a little too complicated sometimes, but There's also a need for some complication. I mean, it's technology, and like different, in any business, the technology jargon can get a little bit silly.
Absolutely. And tech in general too. Like my husband's in cybersecurity and he speaks in terabytes. I speak in CPMs. We do not understand each other
Such a good point.
at all. So amazing. But yeah, I mean, we definitely all ended up here by accident, as you kind of put it. There's no real way to be an expert. So I think we all can be humble and continue to learn, which is why we have these conversations like we are doing today.
Of course.
But I would love to really kind of dive in more about Pontiac Intelligence to start and kind of what kind of sets you apart as the next generation DSP within this kind of saturated ad tech space, especially within CTV.
Right. So, well, and it ties directly to privacy, okay, which is basically the Chrome announcement of the cookies kind of staying, I'll say with quotes, around, or whatever they're going to do, but they just announced that they're not quite cutting them entirely in some capacity. We think of it more as there's a general movement towards more privacy conscious advertising. And browsing and your cell phone controlling this information, everybody across the world, especially in the EU, is hyper-focused on what information are people brokering between each other that the individual did not consent to. Okay, this is like that's the movement on privacy, the privacy wave, I would call it, is not stopping. Now, again, the Google announcement about cookies might stick around some. There's a lot of personalization and targetability that will continue to exist, but we think that the privacy wave will just continue. So if that continues, we're playing the game, which most people who build technology are, of trying to throw the ball downfield and hope that your receiver ends up like we have to make some guesses about what the future will look like. The privacy wave is definitely going to sweep through. So in our opinion, that will mean that the publishers or the content owners will have more control, and they're going to sell it more than they do today through what are called private marketplace deals, or an acronym, PMP. And the PMP world of transacting things through PMPs is a core difference than what DSPs were originally built to do. Originally, DSPs were built because you could use data, cookie data mostly, and layer that on all the publishers in one platform. So huge amounts of data with huge amounts of inventory from all different sources, and the DSP would make it all work for you. We think of the world as going to be PMP management. We think that the future will be that you want to make 26 deals. It's really horrendous to log into 26 platforms. So we think slowly people are going to keep coming this way, and they'll make the inventory available through what are called PMPs. So Pontiac was never built for cookies. It was never built on this idea that we're going to layer in huge amounts of data across the open exchange. Pontiac is built as a private marketplace management platform, or what we like to joke is a PMP.
What's interesting there is, and I come from PubMatic, so shout out to them for being, I think, a really good supply side platform. But it's interesting because more SSPs tend to lean on the one-to-many or one-to-one deals that are in that marketplace, right? So it seems like you're now converging the approach between a demand-side platform and the way supply-side platforms have kind of gone about it, with a little bit more data and intent around whether it be log level transparency or just targeting in general, because you still have cookies available at this point. So I'm not sure if I'm hitting that on the head or if I'm missing the point, but kind of wanted to see if that's the convergence there.
No, totally. And with all the curation tools that are coming out of the SSPs, so they're making it more so that you can carve up the inventory. That SSP is a supply side platform, and a supply side platform is typically built into the inventory directly. So why is it an SSP and a DSP? SSP has pieces of code on publishers' pages to help them sell the ad space. A DSP has code on an advertiser's webpage to optimize media placements. Okay, so the core difference is that the SSP typically is working to monetize inventory and trying to do a million different ways to do that. Whereas a DSP sells to an advertiser and just focuses on what type of optimization through usually pixel data, although that is changing, but what type of information can you put into the system to make better decisions on what you're buying? So what's interesting is that these used to be very different sides of a big coin. I don't know, I'm going to lose the analogy here, but they're getting closer. Like your gut is right where you're like, because now some SSPs, including PubMatic and Magnite and all the big ones, are trying to make advertiser direct deals. And some DSPs are making publisher direct deals. So it is getting a little bit more muddled in the middle of who's what. But I kind of boiled it down. If your code on pages on advertiser sites and you're doing optimization, to me, that's more of a quote unquote buy side platform. And as I said, vice versa.
I guess switching it into more of a connected TV view, right? Like now with advanced TV being out, whether it be over the top or connected, how is Pontiac handling, that evolution of viewership? And are you guys approaching it more from a still data privacy, or is it from a content strategy? Would love to understand how you guys operate as a DSP with the connected TV lens in scope.
As I said, a lot of this came out of necessity from like what wasn't great in the current DSP stack that most agencies and advertisers use. And we noticed that a lot of CTV publishers pass various and more than I was aware data to the buyer. So like a lot of the CTV publishers, maybe it's again, content owner, but there's also the cable companies who are allotted certain amounts of each piece of content. There's also EMVPD is like a company on the CTV scape that like buys content and resells it. A couple of these guys, Philo is one that comes to mind, but a couple of them are these services that like buy their own content and resell. So like it gets so complicated in terms of like who represents CTV inventory. But what we noticed is that no matter which platform we used and who we did the deal with, a lot of the information they were passing us was not actionable and not easy to pull in the reporting. I mean, as simple as that. So we've built it so that the buyer can see all the information getting received by the CTV deals. And then, as I said, most CTV should be bought through a grouping of 8 to 20 deals from different providers. And that is something really hard to manage in most DSPs well. Whereas in our platform, basically you break out each PMP as its own allocation. You can see what's coming in. You can optimize. You can understand which ones are passing like different data points, the IFA, which is like an identifier for the CTV device. So each one provides some different things. So our platform makes it a little bit better for advanced buyers to like pick off and optimize individual PMPs inside a major buy. And I'm not doing a great job explaining, but that is actually, if you use a DSP for this, typically it's very frustrating in kind of the old school technology. And that's where we've been winning business.
Gotcha.
Got it. And then I think too, obviously we know how important kind of that log level data is to the buy side, especially when it comes to targeting appropriately. But a lot of publishers do have sensitivity around sharing that data, typically due to their own direct sales strategy, maybe channel conflict, et cetera. So I guess, how do you approach those types of conversations to unlock those dollars that are typically maybe held closer to the chest for some publishers within CTV?
So through our platform and through all this buying that we do, we've gotten a sense of who's passing what information. Okay, so some of the content owners, people that make TV shows, they're happy to share the information of which TV show, even the episode, like the episode name of the show. And that can be really, really great for some buyers. Some buyers are very comforted that they know where it's running, they know what content it's against, and they feel better about it. Other providers don't provide any information, as you said. So like the log level data conversation is a good one for us generally because we'll provide the buyer whatever we get from the publisher. Like here's what you see. But they'll say things like, hey, can I get show level data from these people? Again, not like if you've used an old school, if you use a more legacy style DSP buying platform. Again, it's not, I don't want to say encouraged, but like, it's not built to push you to go call people on the phone. It's built to make it so you push buttons and it's all good. But we have clients who are like, hey, I really want to get this data from these providers. And now we're able to kind of, it's still phone calls, but it's automated after that, where we can go back to the publishers and say, hey, we have this buyer, they're willing to spend some money. Can we unlock a little bit more information for them? And just as you said, if you come with the dollars, the providers usually are willing to kind of, if you look more like a direct deal and come with direct deal dollars, they'll treat you, even if it's programmatic, more like a direct deal. So they'll give you more information. So that's been the interesting thing, is like, I'm not the publisher. I can't I can't force the issue, but we're just trying to make it so that buyers can clearly see everything they should be able to see. And if they can see the show, that's amazing. They might not be able to action on it, as you said. Sometimes you can, sometimes you can't. But log level data is just getting your hands dirty. You can open an Excel document with a sample of the logs, and the buyers can understand what they're getting, all the detail. And it brings it home a little bit. Programmatic, since I've been in it 20 years now, it's always been, the biggest problem is that it's hard to see the clear raw data of what are we buying and selling. So the log level data conversation is always great, because it's like, here's everything we know about what we're buying. And it's like, buyers can sink their teeth in. They feel comfort. They're like, okay, I know what I'm buying. And again, some of the major providers tell you it ran somewhere on our app. So you might not say, well, okay, I don't love this. But again, it's just knowing who's at who. And if they're super premium and you want to be on it, you may accept that. And if they're not, and you don't know them and you don't need to be on there, that might be when you can make some of those decisions.
And this also leads into a good question around one-to-one targeting, deterministic targeting, which is part of the Google environment and the announcement, right? I think one thing that's good to note is 52% of the entire population is on Safari, right? So you're still hitting 1 and 2. On top of that, you have IDFA, or ID for advertisers, already deprecated. You have mobile ad IDs already deprecated. So while Google is still remaining with cookies for the foreseeable future, it's safe to say that that's not going to be the only route to go, given that Chrome's not the only browser out there, because you have Mozilla and a few others, depending on the geo that you're in. When you think of the implications that this has on the industry, do you think there's going to be some false sense of security? Do you feel that there may be new approaches? I think modeling off of cookies isn't a bad idea, given the fact that they're still there. But again, there's a lot of ways you can slice this pie. Would love to get your thoughts on the implications and potential innovations that may come of this.
The allure of addressability, the allure to the buyer, and this has been going on for a long time, of like, I know my audience, I don't care where they see the ad as much as I want to reach a certain person. This is a marketer's, they spend hours talking internally and with different teams, and these big companies have armies of people that have an opinion of who's the audience that will buy this product. That's how they talk. They talk about our audience. Who's going to buy it? These people. They don't talk about what do those people watch. They don't talk about exactly where do they live. Obviously, that comes up, it comes up, but it's not. Mostly, it's about this audience of a type of person that's going to buy this. They just had a child. They're going to need a crib, right? There's this like balance of like, what do we do as marketers so that the buyers are obsessed with audience and being able to say that they reach the right people. Inventory providers that are not the top 1 or 2 also need to help justify that they can reach their audiences on their locations, right? So like, if you publish a magazine about hiking the great outdoors, LL Bean has been a client for a very long time. Okay. So like all the programmatic, all the allure of digital is, how can I make more dollars? I need to show that I have an audience that somebody didn't expect. So everybody loves this audience stuff. Marketers love it. The publishers that are not the top 5 generally see some benefit by using audience data. But privacy, users don't really want to be tracked, right? They don't. So this is this game that goes on of like, and this is what I don't like about the business, is that, okay, so by Google saying this, and I don't think they wanted to delay this. I think they wanted to do it, but because of how much pushback they're getting, I think they said, we're not going to do it for now. But they like gave an excuse to a lot of these companies that had not come up with great solutions that can now say, we're just modeling it off of the data and we can kind of call it cookie-based now. What they were trying to do is get the business to be a little bit better, which I think they knew what the better was. And that's stitching together things across a couple of publishers, making consortiums, making different things that are not using cookies, but login information. Like Google knows the way of this is going is a slightly more annoying for the user with the logins, but probably better for the actual targeting and not so much money to the third-party data companies, which I don't think Google loves. I think the frustrating thing is that they kind of had to say like, okay, we're going to leave that in here. And the thing that frustrates me is that now we're able to see a lot of people kind of continue with the status quo. And again, a lot of people are very happy as long as they can quote unquote reach their audience, which, as you said, 52% of people on Safari, it doesn't work. It doesn't work on a ton of the CTV stuff. Most of everything now is actually being done kind of by IP address, which is not that accurate. So like there's like,
especially in Safari.
Yeah, well, not just Safari, within Apple devices.
Yeah.
Right? Like, it's like any Apple device is cohorted into between 20 and 30 IP addresses. And then you also have 15 different states with their own legislation that copy CCPA.
That are all going to do this? Exactly.
Yeah.
So,
and then you also, on top of that, you have people making money off of this because, like, an example would be Delete Me, which is an app that you can literally go to. They aggregate all of your data for you. So I'm sure they probably flip it at some point, but you can delete it if you don't flip. If you don't, then they'll flip it. But my point is, there are a lot of people that are conscious of their own data now, which makes it empowering, but also scary for, I think, a marketer who is going after that one-to-one match.
Well, and it's also a little bit of like, we talked about this at the beginning. This is complicated stuff. Like, basically what I'm saying is that you might be able to target your audience on this publisher and not on this one. And like, why, how, what, who? Like, can you imagine how many complicated concepts are coming out of just a very basic thing of like, no, you have to do two different types of audience analysis for this because these guys, going back to the marketer, they're like, I just want to reach this audience. It's almost like, listen, they're not PhDs and is advanced in this nuance to do it right. And you know what? Even if they are, some people at the agencies and some people on the marketing side and some people, there's so many people involved. Even if there are some very smart people kind of saying, this is how it should be done. It ends up getting lost a little bit in translation. It's hard to change the way $1 trillion business does business. It's just some of the things are hard to change. So I think it's like, it's very interesting to watch, like, how is it going to change? What's going to be forced upon us from the user perspective? But like, I don't think it was their fault. If you want to fault them, I mean, they're Google. They're easy to fault. But like, I don't think they really wanted to do this. I think they were trying to push it towards a new tomorrow where marketers had to accept, no, there's no easy button. And now they can kind of be swept into, no, there's still the easy button. And I think even Google was trying to say, like, no, we have to force education because that's going to come first. Businesses get involved and all types of, it's unfair and all that stuff. And like, listen, they came up against more than they anticipated, I think. But I don't think that and again, people say that it's all for their gain. I'm sure that they know that there's ways that they'll win because they're Google. They win. If they lose, they win. So I don't think that they're that worried about how the market flows. I literally think they were trying to help this conversation. I think they get frustrated when marketers come to them and be like, can I just reach my audience? And they are like, that's not the way the world works. I don't think they say that, but I think that literally they watch it with their big clients. Every big corporation is a giant Google client. They talk to these people. And I think that they also are trying to force this conversation. Like, tomorrow is not going to be that easy. I need you to do this just to go to YouTube. Like, even in Google, they're like, well, no, you have to use this thing and you have to do it this way and you can't use that data. It doesn't come with this. Totally different than search. I mean, like, even inside Google, I think they have this problem of like, no, the marketer said they just want to reach people that are in market for a blue Mercedes. And it's like, how? All right. Like, so I think that that's something that they were trying to go for that got a little bit stifled here.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think too, similar to Pontiac, Seedtag, we're also a business that wasn't built on cookies. So we've been privacy first. And I think with this entire conversation, all these companies for 2-3 years now have already done the work, the legwork, the investment in platforms, data partners, demand partners, future strategies. So this change doesn't necessarily mean it's the end of this conversation. It's just that we have more time to figure out the best solution depending on kind of where you sit in the ecosystem for your needs, which also kind of brings up contextual, as that's something we also kind of specialize in. And as we're thinking about CTV to tie in the log level data, you don't want to see the same ad 4 times in a streaming session. So I think if you're able to use that to your benefit when you're speaking with the publishers about why that information would be helpful, that can also help unlock dollars. How are you also kind of seeing the role of contextual advertising evolving as the privacy first wave is coming through?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's amazing because the contextual side is seeing innovation, I think, from a couple different forces, basically. And, there's the contextualizing the web-based inventory and like figuring out what is contextually relevant on a written page. There's like an art to that, right? There's like an art to there's a technology component, obviously, but there's also an art. How are you going to break up categories of the languages, right? Like the basic of like, how are you going to contextualize? How are you going to figure that out? But that is a thing that's been done for a while, right? That is not kind of new. What's new is that on CTV, when you're talking about contextual, you're talking about like what scenes are happening. What is the emotion of the viewer? What is the live sporting event, right? So like the actual event instead of just it's not just baseball, it's baseball and it's the Cardinals at the Royals in a night game and blah, blah. So there's a lot of different, the contextual of video. This is where I think you're going to see AI innovation and all types of things of like, how can people help us figure out what is in a video? Like what is in a movie? What is in that? And a lot of companies are doing this now. So because we're the buying platform and our clients might come with some integration they need, we've done integrations with several of these companies that may help, instead of just knowing that it was on a TV show, it also lists out all the things that happened in that show. Or there's others that do emotions off of this or different things of kind of like what other information can we attach to this inventory that's interesting? I think that's where like the contextual ring is kind of bleeding into video. As buyers and as a platform and as kind of our take is always, how do I do best for my client, the buying client? We're always trying to put all the information in front of them. This is how much of this served here. And here's where you can see this data. And these guys help break this out, blah, blah, blah. But it goes back to what I said before a little bit, where it's like each one, if you really want to do this, you got to have a little bit of a different approach for different like tranches of inventory that provide different levels of information. It's a new market because contextual and the word contextual and video are kind of just really, I think, coming together a little bit, right? And I think that that's what's exciting now. But as audiences go, any type of context or signals about the inventory that's more advanced is going to be very important. And it's a great conversation. It's great to talk about the inventory because, again, the publishers became the second fiddle to the audience. So I think that it's good. We've seen a lot of different types of companies roll out and do this. And I think to varying levels, to varying degrees of success, but all kind of on the bubble waiting for more of the identity thing to keep waving through.
Yeah, I think we've discussed a few challenges, identity being one, which is obviously tailwinding off of privacy and Google. Contextual, I think, is a good solution to that. Do you have like maybe one or two opportunities where you see either DSPs, advertisers, or even supply side platforms as they kind of migrate over into the forward-facing client view? What are some opportunities for solutions that you see in the next 12 months and potentially even 24?
Well, yeah, I mean, there's companies working to enhance the bid stream of what's going on with the video ads, what's in the video ad. And I think that stuff gets to be more and more, what more information can I get about the ad experience? As you said, the podding, so like knowing to not target the same ad in a pod, that is actually in RTB 2.6 specification. But most of the industry runs off of 2.4 or 2.5. But just so you know, it's like funny to be like, wait a second, why am I seeing the same ad 3 times in a row? There's people who are like, this will solve it. And then there's other people across these platforms that we're talking about who are like, that seems annoying. It's, again, when you're dealing with billions of dollars a month in transactions, I can understand saying hold your horses. But it is interesting to be like, they have the solution, they've printed it, it is documented, just waiting for that use now to kick up a little bit more. Yeah, I mean, I think that the enhancing more information about what the inventory has without like forcing the publishers to do it in a way, like more about that type of contextual. We spend a tremendous amount of time having our clients. We have a part of our platform called the audience research tool that does a lot of work focusing on zip codes. So like in our mind, even if they pulled away all the privacy stuff, you're probably going to be able to figure out basically the zip code or some type of geographic indicator of where the users are, just because, you don't want to advertise for a car dealership that's not within 50 or 100 miles. That's not fair to the car dealership. So like they're always going to provide some geo signal of who's seeing the ad. So we built a very intricate system that like analyzes zip codes in America, like very detailed. And that's census data, but that's also because we serve so many ads, we can kind of figure out what zip codes read more about certain things than other people. So it's a very broad stroke contextual analysis, not one-to-one, but one to zip code. And we've built that because, again, I think that there's going to be, just like the contextual thing, businesses that enhance the data with other data points that will succeed. I don't know how big the businesses are, but I think that there will be more businesses that try to give more information on the inventory. And I think that there will be some smart things that come out, especially with AI and some of the, with signal loss, as we're talking about, and AI, I think that there will be more.
Yeah. And I mean, do you think we'll ever get to a place where we could marry that with the viewers streaming like kind of history? Like, this is the 10th true crime documentary this person has watched. They're clearly in a dark place. Like maybe
ACR data on steroids.
Yeah. Maybe we should serve a happier ad at this point.
I think that that's going to come. I mean, we're seeing the business here. It's so early on these pipes. You know, this is not display banner ads with programmatic where the pipes have been running for 20 years, 17 years, I guess. The ad exchange was invented in 2007. So whatever, 17 years. But like CTV ad pipes, 3 years old. I mean, Netflix was like, we're going to do this. 6 months later, like, not doing that. We're doing this. 6 months later, like, that didn't work either. Like, it's just very early. It's just not their fault. It's just, these are not the same ads. It's not the same delivery. They're high quality ads on people's TVs going through these pipes that were built for banner ads, gigantic ad, tiny ad, right? And so there's like really interesting things that like the technology is so new. That's why we built it more for CTV, because we knew that this technology is not going to be the same one as yesterday. So using a lot of the same things and same players, but it's very young. I mean, it's very, you know, I bet you in 10 years, the laughs will be like, can you imagine seeing the same ad 3 times in a row? Like the ads will be so well targeted and blah, 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 but we're in that.
I can, it's happened to me. Well, cool. I think this has been a very illuminating conversation.
Yeah.
And I appreciate the enthusiasm that's come with it too, to be honest.
I always like asking what you're currently reading or what's on your bookshelf maybe, or planning to read, especially just in our industry. As we said, it's so weird and accidental. And especially being in the C-suite, people like hearing kind of what leadership is looking at next.
Well, so in terms of the business, I try to stay very up on all the trades and all of the common providers and people that write and read and talk about this business. I will take 1 second to plug that we are having the Pontiac Summit in New York City, where I'm going to have some of the people from the business talking about things, you guys and other people outside the business, like in my regular life. I don't know what you call this. Other side of my work-life balance is barely a balance. But outside this, what am I reading these days? I've been focused recently on, I got sucked into reading some really boring. I used to think this is boring, but now I've been reading about Middle-Age warfare and a little bit about the spread of, after the Roman Empire fell, things were really chaotic for about 1,000 years, but like unbelievable lessons to be learned about the chaos. Okay. Like the fall of the Roman Empire was mostly the Huns that came in and they were able to destroy towns and things. And that was because they were slightly better at domesticating horses and they had slightly larger and heavier swords. It's not like the Roman towns didn't have swords and horses, okay? Because they did. But they had slightly more domesticated, slightly better and faster, and slightly bigger swords. And they basically ruled all of Europe for 200 years because of that. Now, again, what did that mean? That meant they like marched their butts into a town in the middle of the night, and the people that grabbed their own swords to fight back had a sword that was slightly smaller. So the guy who had the bigger sword was able to do a little bit more damage, right? Before somebody probably was able to get a very bloody time. But what is interesting, and what I've been learning, I've just been fascinated with, is there is a little bit of this where it's like, it's not like the winners in certain scenarios were way better or more advanced. They may have been slightly more advanced, but then they did it really, really well. So like in business, to tie it to business,
Compounding effect of small wins, basically.
Focus on little things, because you know what? One leads to another, and then you're king of the Roman Empire.
It's that simple.
You know, 2 million people, and bada bing, bada boom. What do you know? You're in charge. So yeah, you asked, but I've been reading that, but not much, but some.
That's one of the better finishes we've had.
Yeah. Yeah. It's usually like I'm working on bettering myself, or, you know, being a better person.
Now we're just rolling 200 years.
Yeah. Straight.
Yeah, I mean, I manage a pretty sizable team now, and like, it's hard. I mean, you guys work in this business too, but this business is hard. Winning pitches, winning business, trying to change the status quo, trying to change what somebody was doing yesterday. It can be very frustrating. There can be a lot of people who don't understand all the acronyms. There can be people that don't want to change how they're doing it. There can be people that don't like you for a reason that you don't even know. So it can be very frustrating. So I kind of keep it with my people as well as myself. I would say the bettering ourselves thing ties to what it is, which is like spend some time focusing on other things in the world that are unrelated to the transaction of advertising, because you can get obsessed and you can't necessarily force it. You can't just, you know, you've seen this, I'm sure, a million times, both of you. We're hiring 32 salespeople. And then soon after that, they're like, we're letting go most of the salespeople. Like, this business doesn't move that well. It's like it's very slow, and it can be very exhausting. It can be hard. So I would say that a little bit on the bettering yourself thing. I think we all are, but it's a little bit of like, for us, it's like, I try to do things that are totally unrelated sometimes to make sure that I keep my sanity. It's hard. I've been a salesman now at this company for 11 years. So you can imagine it takes time to
highs and lows.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, okay, thank you so much. This has been a great conversation, and we appreciate you taking the time. It's refreshing to hear the DSP side, especially when, you know, we're focusing on publishers. So again, appreciate the moment, and hopefully we talk again soon, and maybe see you at the Pontiac event.
Thank you, Tina and Mike. Thank you so much for having me. This was great.
Of course.
Perfect. Thank you.